Welcome everyone to the April 7, 2021 workshop agenda for the board budget workshop. We have Mr. Bishop joining us online virtually, and we have 5 members in attendance, and Ms. Joyner will be joining us shortly. We do not have anyone listed for public comment, so I didn't say it was 12 o'clock, I think, but we will now call Mr. Dawes to present the budget workshop.
Thank you, President. Mr. Murray, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Dr. Ramsey. I want to thank you for the opportunity to go through our planning process for our 21-22 budget year. We actually began this process probably in September and started working with Dr. Goodnow and how we could make sure that this budget works towards the goals that our T&L department will be having and our board goals. And so we have been working closely together to make sure that the budget is a roadmap that they can use to help. It always has helped, but really mainstream some of our problem areas and make sure that we can move forward with those. Today I have with me Carla Martin, our Executive Director of Financial Services, Tony Kingman, our Director of Budget, and of course Mr. Woodrow Bailey, Chief of Human Capital. The first thing is the agenda, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. The first part, because a lot of this is information we have done in the past in the last board meeting also. But some of the key dates as we move forward through our budget workshops today and May 5th and June 8th. Then we will have our budget adopted in the regular board meeting of June 28th of this year. You know, some of the key components that we get to develop our budget, we have 0 right now. As far as we don't have any value from MCAD yet. That comes April 30th. And so as we move forward, these are all estimates. Everything we talk about are our best guesses on estimates. So, and of course, then we get to receive our certified values after we approve our budget. On the next page, our budget, our 2021 budget highlights. We began the year of a budget of $396 million. That is increased to $431.8 million, mainly due to tax increase, tax collection increase, and also some state funding increases. One of the things, and Mr. Trisket pointed out at the last board meeting, is our Chapter 49 payment estimate went from $118.5 million to $143.4 million as our tax collections grew. And then, which is roughly 33% of our total. That's a third of our budget. 33% of our total revenue.
And so I know we're estimating because we don't have the MCAT, but I mean, how do we close that gap on the estimate? That's a big discrepancy in one calendar or one fiscal year. Yeah,
you know, when we first looked at this, and school finance changes all the way through the year, this being a super change because of COVID and all the different information that came out from TEA. So when we first looked at this, and our we started last year's budget thinking that maybe our tax collections may be a little off at 95% instead of pretty much we collect with current and delinquent taxes right at 100%. So just that figure right there makes a big increase. Of course, we had increased this number at the second budget amendment where we increased our recapture to about 131 million. So from that point to 143, after we received our certified values, which came in higher than what we had originally estimated with the estimate. So that change right there after that, is the first or second budget amendment? Second. That, once we got MCAD's certified values, that grew our recapture to 131 million at that point in time.
And Mr. Dawes, let me just make a statement that I failed to make before we started. Because we have limited time today, we are only on an hour schedule. I want to make sure that Mr. Dodge gets through with his presentation. So I want to let him present, and then we'll ask questions at that point. So please just write them down if you will. We'll address them all at once. So sorry, Mr. Dodge.
And I said I was going to go through this quickly, and then I'll apologize. So yeah, and so as we presented the last board meeting, you know, we're looking at right now excess revenue about $6 million. And we're working with different departments to work through that. The next page is our student membership trend. And you can see we were on a growth pattern before we hit COVID. And hopefully we'll get back on that growth pattern. This is Snapshot. Snapshot is the last Friday in October. So these numbers are based off Snapshot data, not where we are currently, but at Snapshot. Currently, our enrollment is 25,275, but and then the bottom line, the red line, is our teachers and how many teachers we have, and it looks a little funny just because when we had more students, we had less teachers, but we had a lot of vacancies in 1920. Those positions were there. It's just we had a lot of vacancies, and in 2021, we're able to fill those vacancies, and so that's why our teacher growth was there. As we look at our tax rate history, going from 1213 all the way to our estimated tax rate, you can see that we've actually reduced tax rates as we move forward. This current year, we were at 95.64 in our M&O and 7.02 cents in INS, and that's what we're estimating right now to be our tax rate as we move forward. And that's how our budget planning is set right now. The next two slides are simply some enrollment comparison ethnicities. And I won't go over that, but you can see the different growth, our populations, how they've grown throughout the years or decreased. Also our economic disadvantage comparison. And this hitting the 50% mark, which our teams, our principals, our CNS staff work really hard to get all those free and reduced applications worked out this year, because essentially, you know, we've been on the summer feeding program all year long, which meals are free. And so it was very difficult, but they worked really hard to get all those applications in. This not only helps in Title I funding, but also for like Tom's department in E-rate, it increases the reimbursement that we get back for E-rate funding. So this number has a lot of importance as we move forward in our budget. Our taxable property value trend has grown tremendously over since 11-12 when we were at 11 billion, and our current year values for 1920 was jumped up to 34.4 billion. And then in 2021, 35.5 billion. And the blue line is the April estimate that we get. And you can see that is a conservative estimate as we're building our budget on estimates, essentially, compared to what the actual certified value, and that's the red line as you're moving forward. So that's the reason generally in that first budget amendment or after we receive our certified values that we have to do a budget amendment for the value increase. This is recapture to date. Midland ISD started paying recapture in school year 13-14, and to estimate out through this next budget year is $589 million that we've paid back in recapture. I just gave you the amount we've been that we will give. As we look in our budget, we're estimating our values will drop, and that's why next year's budget amount is so less than what it is currently. We're estimating right now it's 65.59 million. We put the reason for fund balance in here because that seems to be a topic of discussion in the legislature by Representative Huberty in House Bill 3445. He believes school districts have too much fund balance. And, you know, one of the things that we look at is we use our fund balance through the year, really, as cash flow in order to make payroll and everything until we receive funds. Before House Bill 3, Midland ISD didn't receive state funding, really. They received some, but not much. With House Bill 3, that grew, and then when House Bill 3, or when Formula Transition Grant is over, we will go back to not receiving any state funding. So our local, when we're doing our local payment schedule, from October to December, we receive, and mainly all December, receive about 30% of our tax collections. In January, about 30%, and then that rolls over into February about 30%. So we've been in school, or our budget started July 1, and it takes us that long before we're receiving any money if we're not receiving the Formula Transition Grant like we are in state funding right now. And that's one of the reasons for having a good, healthy fund balance, because that's a long time. It's half our budget year before we start receiving tax dollars. The state money that we're receiving right now starts in September. We're on payment class 3. There's 3 payment classes in the state funding. Payment class 1 is they receive monthly payments. Those are for really poor property poor school districts. Payment class 2 is they receive funding the first 3 months of the year from the state, and then it picks back up in April and goes through August. We are on payment class 3 because we are a property wealthy school district. And so we get, roughly 45% of our state funding in September, 35% in October. And then we don't get anything from the state essentially and on Formula Transition Grant until settle up in August. So we rely heavily on our tax collections as we go forward. Our federal grant reimbursements, those are actually reimbursements. Yes, we do have Title I and all those different title funds, but you have to spend the money in order to get it back. So you have to have the cash available at those times too. Any unexpected emergency situations, and then just last year we created a regulation to make sure that we have at least 25% of our budget in fund balance. I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about that. One of the things I do want to talk about on Huberty's bill, it talks about 110 days of cash on hand. Well, for Midland ISD, you can't just have 110 days of cash on hand. One, when we finish the fiscal year, June 30th, we don't pay our recapture payment until August 15th. That's over 110 days worth of cash. That's just paying back the state. That's not funding our district as we move forward. And so this bill is something that we really need to take a look at. If you want to talk to your legislators, I would give them a call because they listen to y'all more than they listen to us sometimes. They always get to hear from us. They don't get to hear from you. They don't get to hear from the public. But there's a reason why we have built fund balance, and mainly it is to make sure that the operations of this school district can maintain before we get actual cash back into it. And then our fund balance right now.
I know you said no question, but if we can make one quick point for those listening. The other reason to have the fund balance that we have and have grown is to account for the big swings in the oil and gas mineral valuations that Midland County experiences, unlike other property wealth districts of a more of a residential or, you know, commercial nature than we are. And I think when you get to projected revenues next year, you'll see why we need to have a healthy fund balance.
Correct.
Go ahead.
And most school districts are on a 4 or 5% increase each year, whereas in Midland, when a lot of your value is minerals, there can be big swings in your values. And you saw the big uptick, 44% increase in 1920. Well, we're looking at going down the other way this next year. And so that is a reason to have a fund balance. And our budget also grew. So that was another reason for we had to maintain that percentage in order to do that.
And we were also concerned about what might happen this legislative session when all predictions were they would have less monies available for the state budget and how that might impact adversely the former House Bill 3 measures that were provided to us in other districts.
Correct. And what we're looking at finishing out for 2021, we went ahead and put the percentage of the fund balance as we move along throughout the year. And so we'll get into a little bit deeper discussion later on in the program or presentation. On the 21-22 preliminary budget development, this is how we allocated to our campuses their non-payroll budgets. And so this is a per 88 per enrollment allocations that go to the campuses. And then on top of that is the department budgets, where on the next page, you see the campus allocations actually went down for this next year, and the department budgets also too. But we are fewer students, so that was the reason for the drop in some of those. Excuse me. And now I'm going to turn it over to my counterpart, Mr. Bailey, and let him talk about staffing.
Thank you, Mr. Dodds. Good afternoon, board members, Superintendent Ramsey. Just want to take a few moments to talk through staffing and compensation and our projections for next year. Of course, the largest expense of the school district, and as far as the budget is concerned, is human capital. So we don't say it's an expense, we say it's an investment, and we invest in human capital. So that is the largest expense that we are looking at. I appreciate, first of all, the human capital team that gathered all these projections for this presentation. Our IMS team maintains staffing and salary information for you. So all of our projections are based upon real numbers, real employees, not just estimates. Our compensation coordinator, of course, manages a comprehensive transparent compensation plan, and we'll be bringing that to you in June May for approval. As well, our staffing directors play an integral role in the process of enforcing staffing controls and making sure that our campuses and departments are staffed appropriately. And as well, another big piece of the staffing budget is the benefits, and we do a good job as well of trying to manage that big piece of the budget. Looks like we logged out. I'm behind the podium, so I guess I'll preach a little bit for a few moments until we get the screen going. But no, I just want to thank the team for their work on presenting this budget. I know you have the information right in front of you, so I'll go ahead and speed forward. The next couple of slides actually shows the cost of living at Midland. I know that some of the conversation in regard to salary and how we will present a compensation plan has to do with market value. When we are looking at teacher salaries across the state, we have to take into consideration what it would require for a teacher to move here to Midland. And contrary to popular belief, even though rental has decreased, the rates have decreased because of more available units now, our cost of living is still very high. And so this is just a real quick slide to show you a graphic to show you of some comparison districts or areas across the state. And You see that gray line represents Midland, and we still have a challenge. This information is recent. It was just from March, so that even through COVID has not necessarily changed. We're still very high when it comes to not only rent, but housing costs in general. So cost of living has to be considered when it comes to that. Next slide shows very quickly where Midland ISD ranks when looking at teacher salaries in comparison to our peer groups. And of course, this comparison group is not only based upon student enrollment, but it is also based upon geographic location. So you'll see some districts that may be smaller than Midland, but are closer, like down in San Angelo, but they're still our competitors. So we have to take them into consideration as well. I will say that, of course, Midland ISD, west of I-35, has the highest teacher pay in this way, out this direction. So that's definitely a moment of commendation for the board for your work in that and teacher salaries. This slide shows the progression that we've made since 2017, 2018. It really gives a good picture of the work that we've been able to accomplish over the last 4 years, and then making projections for the next 5 years. And if you look at that last column, it shows you from 2017-18 school year to the projection of next year. If we go to 57.5, that's an $8,450 increase from just 5 years ago. So that really is a great picture of the work that we've been doing as we progress forward for the next couple of years. Finally, not only for teachers, but this is the work that we've been able to accomplish with our support staff, raising salaries from 8 to 10 2 years ago, last year 10 to 12. And then also for our administrator pay grades 1 through 5 and 6 through 10, you see over to the right what that looks like. So definitely a lot of work and a lot of progress in the area of compensation.
Real quick, who falls into that category, like the pay grade of 1 through 5?
So that's administrative and professional pay grades. When you look at the compensation plan, most of our non-campus leadership staff is in that 1 through 5. Once you get to high school and elementary principals, they're in 6 and above, directors and executives are 6 to 10. So finally, this next slide is the administration's recommendation. Of course, we have prepared other scenarios for your consideration, and we have all that data available. This is just the recommendation from working with finance, talking through budget for next year, of course, under the guidance and leadership of Superintendent Ramsey, talking through what this might look like for next year. This is our recommendation, which is beginning teacher salary of $57,500. Teachers will then receive the step plus the raise, the step plus the new salary schedule, and a 2% midpoint raise for all other pay groups. That's the recommendation. And so,
just so I'm clear, Mr. Bailey, we're increasing the minimum starting salary,
yes,
but then adjusting the entire scale so every teacher on staff would receive, in essence, that.
The step plus the percentage of, yes, that's been increased. So great question. And I'll take a moment just to ask any other questions that you might have in regard to the administration's recommendation.
So what is the slide on page 17? It was the very first slide. This one.
Oh, sorry. I must have skipped over that one. These are staffing requests for this year. And very important. Thank you, President Murray. If you would see, these are, of course, requests that departments and campuses have made up to this point. We will continue to review those. And of course, we submit those to Superintendent Ramsey for her approval. And during the next budget workshop, we will actually have a dollar amount added to the presentation for any new positions that have made that next round of
cut.
Yes.
Did you review that last column? I'm not sure.
So the last column in 2021, the teaching positions, if you remember, Travis teachers moved to IDEA. So we were able to reduce our teaching staff by 39, but then based on student enrollment last year, or in 2021, we did add 21 positions last year. And so you see that reflected on the second slide that Mr. Dodds presented, where we see the higher number of actual teaching positions, and then we're full staff. So that is reflected, of course, in that Payne's report. Now the final 21-22 is the projected number of teaching positions that we would be able to reduce this year based on student enrollment.
In other words, that column doesn't
No, it's not a total.
Well, no, I mean, it doesn't relate to the three columns before it.
Right, yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Now
Yes, sir. Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question, Mr. Bailey.
Okay, hello, Mr. Bishop.
I guess one of the questions I asked, we're talking about the student or the teacher numbers we have. If we keep those numbers where we at, where does that put us at the student-teacher ratio?
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. So if you go back another slide, I think that took, we missed the slide again when we were going through the presentation. Right there. We have our 2021-22 staffing matrix, our staffing guidelines, and that is a linked document. It's several pages, but we are projecting to continue the same staffing ratios that we're utilizing right now, which is pre-K to second grade 22-1, third and fourth grade 24-1, and fifth grade to 12th grade 28-1.
Okay, and the reason why I posed the question is so we don't start the school year having to go to ask the state for waivers if we've got the number of teachers to support the number of students we have. If that's, I know that's another budget item we look at as far as cost, but if we can lower the numbers in the grades that we, in the lower grades or even the high school for that matter, if it's going to give us a better student-teacher ratio and we can stand it or financially, I think it's the right thing to do versus having to go every year to ask for a waiver.
Yes, sir. And one thing about this year, as Mr. Dodds mentioned in his presentation, with student enrollment, basically, we've lost 1,000 students this year. We have not made significant changes in staffing. So as you see on that slide, we just looked at, there's a projection for 8 FTEs. And in your mind, if you think we're losing 1,000 students, or we've lost 1,000 students, that would be more teachers. But actually, we're trying to account for those so we don't encounter that problem, as Mr. Bishop is stating that at the beginning of the year, we have to add FTEs because we lose that number. So there is, based on projections, yes, we make sure that there's some capacity. There's not a large amount of capacity because that would be inefficient, but yes, there is capacity available in our projections.
Okay, and I guess one last question. You mentioned the pay on the 2% increase, and I guess the hourly people, like the people in the maintenance, I guess is that paid $10 to $12, or I wasn't understanding that.
So I hope I understand your question. Yes, we moved from 8 to 10 and 10 to 12, but then the recommendation at this point is not to raise the minimum dollar amount, but that's the desire of the board. We'll listen to your thoughts on that. But a 2% of midpoint of the current pay grade, the current pay scale, it would be a 2% of midpoint raise for all employees that are on pay scale.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bailey, would you just repeat that 24-1 is third grade through what?
Third and fourth grade.
Mr. Bailey, one of the things that, as we talk about these swings in this area, you know what I mean? Our economy is swinging constantly, but is there any information regarding the project that's going to start the interstate, the 3-lane project that I can see moving on already? I mean, eventually that's going to bring X amount of construction people here. Is there any communication with the, I'm trying to think of the
transportation.
Is it
TxDOT?
No, it's not the TxDOT. It's the I know one of the councilmen was on it. It's
The MPO?
I think it's the MPO. But there's
planning.
So what I would say is a part of the demographic study, all of that is taken into account, and
okay, so
those
there's
conversations are had with every city planning, county planning, so that we know what projects are in the works and what's in the works in the next up to 10, 20 years. So
yeah, that's a 25, 30-year project. I think that's going to start. And so that's going to bring those pick back up. I know we're talking about some projections here, but I think we're going to be higher, obviously, because the holes pick back up, activities kind of pick back up. I don't think it's going to be a boom cycle. I don't know that for a fact, but I think it'll be a more steady. But we're gonna have these other big projects that are gonna start up, and it's gonna have people to, once again, it might not be long-term people. It's gonna be people that move here 4 or 5 years or something as it phases of construction goes
Very
on.
possible. So we're looking at, of course, we base our projections on snapshot, which is the highest point of the year. So all those fluctuations, just like with COVID, it's still the unknown, and we do our very best. Final slide, before I turn back to Mr. Dobbs, I know he's ready to come back. School calendar changes are accounted for in this particular, in our projections, of course. When we change the school calendar to more days, that does impact our bus drivers, our CNS workers, teacher assistants, some of the office staff. And so those increases are included in our projections, as well as we have to find out, and we suspended the perfect attendance due to CDC guidance, so that employees would not be encouraged to come to work sick. So we'll look at that, and we'll hear from you, board members, as far as guidance on perfect attendance, retention bonuses. We're reviewing extracurricular stipends based on some of the comments from the last board meeting, and then finally teacher incentive allotment. I appreciate you all for your time this week and attending those office hours. Of course, I have 22-23 in the parentheses, because that's actually the year that we'll have to include that in the budget. But I appreciate Mr. Jones and Ms. Phelps for their work, as we are already, we at least have one applicant that's already received a designation in another state, another district that will, has applied for the school district. So we have to pay those, we have to pay that designation. And so there will be a small budget impact, but really our big impact will be in 22-23. Yes.
One last, on the staffing request sheet, I don't see the 24 to 32 reading specialists that we talked about, strategists. Are they in the budget?
They're already in, because they're positions that currently exist on campuses. Maybe they were utilized in a different way. So we'll be classified.
It's not an additional fiscal.
Okay.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you.
Checking time up here, how we've been doing.
You're on the clock.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Bailey, for that report. We will start on number 24, slide 24, our 21-22 budget planning. And as I told you before, we're still looking at a maintenance and operation tax rate of 0.9564. Our interest in sinking at 0.0702 for a total tax rate of $1.266. Right now, our snapshot, our student membership was 25,579, and we are looking at our budget as far as attendance, average daily attendance, which that's how it's actually figured. It is not figured on enrollment, at 23,419.91. Now, one of the things that we are including in this budget is about a 15% total in values. I know minerals will probably drop a little further than that, but some of the other may increase. That kind of makes that a steady or around a 15%. And just talking with MCAD, they thought that was a pretty decent number. Of course, they don't have all their information yet either. So, but we are working with them. I stay in contact with them at least once a week or whatever, 2 weeks, just to make sure we know where we're headed.
You have to remind me every year. 102, do we have any of the golden pennies left, silver pennies left, the ones that don't go to Robin Hood?
Right now, we would be accessing 4 golden pennies, because the tier 1 tax rate would be 9164.
Okay.
And then we would be using the 4 golden pennies, or 4 golden pennies to 9564.
Okay. That's all of them. There's none on the table that we're not accessing.
There is one,
one.
that the board could approve,
Okay.
but right now with form of transition grant, all that does is transition that from the state to the taxpayer.
Okay.
It doesn't bring us any more money.
What did you say about? Oh,
Right now.
the 50% decrease in property tax value results in a approximately 25% decrease in tax revenues, right?
I'm looking at the next page, 26.
Yes. Yeah.
That 15% in values results in a 25% decrease in revenues,
Yeah.
tax revenue.
Right. And so, and, you know, as we were going through this year, you know, the state allowed us to do the first 2 6-weeks hold harmless. And then we went and was able to get the third 6 weeks hold harmless. And then the legislature and everybody came out and said, we will go ahead and make this whole semester, a whole year hold harmless. And our hold harmless number is 24,471 ADA. So that you can tell the difference in what we would be budgeting for next year and what our hold harmless is actually for this year. So we are not using any hold harmless numbers in our budget next year, and don't anticipate any additional help at that point. And that was the reason, you know, we were on a steady growth pattern. And so our staffing was built on a steady growth pattern, just like nearly every district in the state. And that was the reason, in order to not have to cut jobs at the end of the semester or whatever, that they came out with the ADA hold harmless. And that's, you know, truthfully helped the school districts all across the state.
Sorry. Hold that question till then.
Go ahead, Mr. Skate.
I know that the values are going down. You got 15%. Mr. Davis is saying that's a 25%. You're forecasting almost a 50% drop in Robin Hood. Do you really think that it's going to go that low, given the trend that we have of estimating and then having to pay $30 million more?
That's what our template is telling us. And I mean, we can only go about what our funding template says. We build all these numbers into.
That's 46% decrease is what you're forecasting.
Right. And so that,
I hope you're right.
I hope I am too.
But
I can't tell you if our student growth or if our values change. You know, one of the things in this area that a lot of school districts don't ever have to worry about or ever have to deal with is supplemental value increases. You know, we are looking at nearly $1 billion supplemental value increase for this year, which is really strange. Some of it comes from 2019, some of it comes from 2020. That after, you know, our taxing entity and everything checked with the Railroad Commission and the comptroller, our values have increased or will increase after our certified values. And so that is the reason for some of our gain in tax revenue to push our recapture higher than what we were estimating. So, you know, yes.
Quick clarifying question. So you're saying that in previous years, after they've gone back and looked at the taxable value, and they're basically saying that wasn't the true number, they're turning around and taking.
There was more value not being taxed at that time.
Yes, so they're taking now that value that should have been assessed at the time and
adding
moving
it to the tax rolls, yes.
And moving it down.
Yes.
Well, I'll take that bet, Mr. Dodds. I bet we pay more.
I bet
So,
we do too.
You can buy lunch.
I'll do that.
Is it correct to say that if the values of your values estimate is fairly close, but we have more students than you project, that number would
That
go
could
down?
go down. That could
The 65 million would go
Yeah,
down.
it could go down. If
But
we
your
start
point, Mr.
to-
Davis, they're forecasting a 15% decrease in property value, but the Robin Hood payment's a 45% decrease.
It's not a one-to-one dollar.
I know, but I know it's not
More
a
math.
true apples to apples, but I'm
Right.
saying that's a big swing.
And I can tell you, how many templates have we gone through this year? 14?
Yes.
So we're on template 14
Okay.
since last, when we started this budget year.
Here's hoping you're right. I hope you're right.
Well, I hope I'm right. You know, I'm always looking to try to make sure that we are as accurate as we can. You have to understand, until September 30th or April 30th, we won't have really any information. That'll be a truer information on where we will be at when we get the estimated certified values from.
Which will adjust for our May budget workshop.
Yes, yeah.
We'll just wait and see.
So, yeah. And like I said, this budget is living and breathing. But, you know, we try to pinpoint where we are that day, and then it will change all the way through the year.
Go ahead, sorry.
And our student usually, as Mr. Bailey said, our highest amount of students is usually a snapshot, and then we start trending down. And so as students come down, that changes recapture, that changes our funding, it changes everything as we move through the budget year. So it's a fun game, and we try to play it the best way we can. But that is, you're looking at a total revenue dropping from 431 down to 343. So that is an $88 million drop in total revenue. The way House Bill 3 and the Foreign Transition Grant, we essentially have about the same amount of money bottom line, because even though our total revenue is lower, our recapture drops down, and so our total spend is relatively the same. So that's, and it's
Say that last sentence again. Say that last part again.
So as even though our revenue is dropping, our recapture, our expenditure is dropping also. So when we get to the total revenues minus the recapture, it's still about the same as we have this current year and the next year. And I know it's totally different, but that's the way House Bill 3 works. It kind of holds us in a single or an area of spending that we would have available to us.
And I guess percentage-wise, it may be less, but it's as I calculate.
And the state's going to have to drop their budget too.
We're going to spend $10 million less on the non-Robin Hood expenses next year than we spent this year.
Correct. I mean, estimated right now.
Yeah.
And by the time June 28th, these numbers will change slightly as we're still continuing through our budget process. But anyway. Any other questions on this slide?
Yes, Mr. Dodds, I have a question. You might have to go back a little bit. Where it showed you ADA numbers.
Yes.
You've shown the 25,579, and then it's shown
snapshot enrollment number.
Okay, I guess my question was on that is that also including are those numbers reflecting on our MOA possibly where students wasn't checking in every day or anything like that?
The enrollment numbers the ADA picks up the MOA students as they are, excuse me, as they do attendance on campus, they do include the MOA students on our attendance as we move forward, as we go through the year.
Okay, so if those students are not logging in at a particular time, then they're just like if they wasn't at school, they was counted absent. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
It is a combination of active engagement, and engagement includes work completed. So we'll add that information to the Friday communique. So.
Thank you.
As we move the slide, as we're checking the time, as we look at the slide, the next slide, I've talked to you about what happens when we move out of the transition grant. And, and we went back to 1819 to our total revenue budget at 288 million. And with House Bill 3, with the property value growth that we received, that jumped our budgets way up because of recapture. But in our budget in 1920 went to 415 as far as revenue, 2021 422. But then as we look at our revenue for the next year and the next and the next, we're roughly about the same. And we forecasted out after next year a 1% student growth. 7.5% value growth each year, which hurts us to a point because that compresses our tax rate at that time. I mean, as far as budget-wise, for our taxpayers, it's great. But if we would have stayed on an even keel with our values and not been in the whole field, and you have value drops, you have value increases. Under House Bill 3, if you go over 4%, which is kind of the state average, then that starts compressing your tax rate. That also reduces your tax money at that point in time, which reduces your recapture as you move forward. Now, it doesn't show it here because we're also adding different growth patterns as we move forward. But the main thing about this slide is when we get through with Formula Transition Grant, that's what FTG stands for, Formula Transition Grant. When we get through with the Formula Transition Grant in 23-24, when we move into 24-25, that's where you see the big dip in what our budgets will be. And of course, like I said, we're operating off total estimates as we work through. But I wanted to show y'all this is where we're headed down the road. Kind of put that in the back of your mind that as we move forward in different things, we should be fine through the 23-24 year. But we will be working through those years to make sure that this slide down here for 24-25 doesn't dip into that far. That's another reason to have fund balances too, is as we end the Formula Transition Grant. And I can guarantee you, just like ASATAR, they will not bring it back. They will end it. There's even talk of start reducing it now. Well, I think we can maintain what we need to do and do the things as a district with those Formula Transition Grants, but we will work towards as we move forward. Now, if we have bigger student growth, if we have different things happen throughout the years, these can change. But at this point in time, this is what we're looking at. And see, I thought that's why we take care of it. Anyway, as we move into the district highlights, these are some of the things that are built in the budget, correct, Tony?
Yeah. So, yeah, my understanding, Mr. Bailey covered. He says that was that recommendation.
They are in the budget,
okay.
and so are the ENF. They are in the budget as a plan that we are working towards.
But we need to have a conversation about, to Mr. Bishop's point, raising the minimum for support staff. They're going to get a raise at the midpoint like the rest, but if we want to raise the minimum, Mr. Bailey, we need to make that direction.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I would be in favor of that. They're at 12. I think we need to take it to 13, maybe 14 if the budget will support it.
We can run those numbers because, and I don't want to jump in on his, but that also adjusts ever pay scale as we do that. So
I'll just tell you, I have an 18-year-old son that makes $18 an hour working part-time, and I got a 16-year-old daughter that's making $10 an hour plus tips. Both of those jobs probably make more per hour than starting salary for a support staff at MISD.
Absolutely. And there was some more information that we provided or we gathered, and that's average in Midland is 18.
Yeah, we need to
that's
get
median, of course, but by moving that to 13 minimum, which is letter B, then we'll have to adjust numbers to letter C.
Which I think, I personally think we should make an effort to
Or A,
Why didn't A fill in based on the recommendation?
because it was purely a recommendation. We didn't want to move forward until we heard from the board.
I think we should do both.
And because the concern is, we want to bring you actual data so you can see the numbers. The concern, going back to the last slide, is we also don't want to be in a place where we're moving and then in a year or two we're laying people off because.
Yeah, I think run the numbers, Mr.
Yeah.
Johnson, see, but I certainly would be in favor of that if the budget supports it. We need to do it.
And I told Mr. Bailey we need to be ready for that. That would be something that
Yeah,
would
we
be
can
brought
bring
up.
it for the next one.
Absolutely. That's my opinion.
If there's anything that I can say, statistically, consistent over the last 35 years is that during conversations, people have always asked, whether it's been town hall meeting, private meeting, group meeting, people have always supported teacher pay. And you know, I've said this a couple of times, and it seems like people are going to beat me over the head for it, but you know, the business of the school, you know, our district is in a sense a business of educating children, and it's an investment for the community. But people do need to understand that at the end of the day, when we're talking about fund balance, that the money from the state is not a guaranteed money. So there could, I think we ran a while back some situations about how if the law is not passed, then the district could default. And it could happen. I mean, it could happen that some law doesn't get passed through fund, and then we could go in a default type of situation. So we need to have, while the law's being worked out to fund, we need to have the time to support our system, our educators through that period till the legislation, you know, figures what law and how much they're going to fund again as we go through this process. So I appreciate a lot the work that y'all do. I don't think it's recognized enough in the sense that we have to balance our books, pay our people, and we're trying to do it honestly. I've said before that I think that a lot of the comments that have happened in the past that teachers are leaving because they get paid better somewhere else. That's been a conversation for a while, but I've said that we should get as competitive as we can with the best districts in the state of Texas. So that's for sure not an excuse as to why you're leaving Midland ISD.
Right.
So.
Right. And I think Mr. Bailey and his staff and the board, as they have over the last few years, increasing teacher pay, and I mean, just in their auxiliary pay like they have has been a big beneficiary of, I mean, you see our vacancies being very little this year, and during a terrible year, essentially, with COVID and different things. You know, when we have actual teachers in the classroom and we have those positions filled, you know, and I know he recruits and goes and their whole team works. That's just a testament of people are really wanting to be here. One is because of pay, but two, you know, we are trying to put our students first, and that's what we're trying to do with teacher pay, so we can get the best qualified teachers here and keep them here, you know, because it is better not to have any vacancies. Even though, you know, as a budget guy, you want a little extra savings in there, but, you know, I'd rather have teachers in the classroom and the support in the classroom than just a little bit of savings. We can work through the rest of that. And that's one of the highlights of this budget, is to make sure that we're trying to do the best we can to support all that.
So can you bring us next month budget impact of $13 an hour and $14 an hour just to see that?
What I would suggest is starting at 50 cents an hour raise, because that's $1,000 that you recommended for the rest of the district. I think this was the plan for teachers and administrators. So let's start there and let's build out.
CPA.
Number guy.
And kind of get it to, because even 1250 is not enough to compare with what everybody else in Midland's doing.
Right.
But at least that shows us, you know, that's the minimum we ought to consider, because that's the same raise that everybody else got.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And another point is, we want to make sure that we're talking about compensation completely. Like, we've had the internal conversations about, we know that healthcare is going up, but we want to make sure that the district offsets that for our employees. And so that's especially helpful. Percentage-wise, our lowest paying employees are a larger percentage of of the compensation package. And so that's really important for us to keep in mind.
Due to the timing of this meeting, that the next one will have more information about benefits. Right now, we do have a plan, the department's worked really hard to have a plan that's still $0 contribution for the employee on their behalf, so
Good.
we'll bring that as well.
Is there any other questions?
I think we have our marching orders.
What's
Loud
that?
and clear. Thank you.
Yes, we will work on everything that was brought up.
I have a question, and seeing as how this is my first one of these to attend, I'm definitely on a learning curve. I have lots of questions that I'll sidebar with you later. But when we last met for the special board meeting concerning young women's and the demographic study, and I know that we're in the very beginning stages of that, but I also understand that there was no budgeting for for any version of the young women's expansion, and I'm just wondering kind of where does that fall? Is that going to be addressed? I'm sure.
Right
I know
now-
this is a bird's eye view.
So-
Yeah, right now, phase 3 is actually, we put it in this current year budget, correct?
Current year we're in,
Yes, and phase 4 is actually built into this budget right now, as the plan is. Now, if
With
that
portables.
changes, then we'll move
And as a
forward.
reminder, we have the committees, so finance committee, facilities committee, so your subgroups will also have those deep dive conversations and those things come forward as recommendations to the full board.
Right.
Right, I wanted to understand how we were.
and but when
applying
you
that
say
to this.
phase as they are, you mean portable expansion?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
And right now, that's
But
all we
never
have
done
to go on. But that was one of the things that we did not want to be caught and have to come back if the phases, however that goes, however everything goes. We'll let facilities and Ms. Spencer and
But we've taken it into account.
Yes.
We're not out over our skis where we were when we didn't have it in at all.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, I did include a budget 101, if y'all are having a hard time sleeping, start reading that, that'll put you to sleep just like that anytime you start.
No, I appreciate that. I like going back, especially the code structure is helpful, because every taxing entity does a little bit.
Right, so I just wanted y'all to have that, and
Thank you.
so you could, just kind of familiarize yourself with how budgets work for the district. Any other questions?
This is available in board book beyond today. It's not going to disappear if we wanted to access it via board book.
I don't know if it's on board book, but we can probably.
Well, it is. I mean,
It
it's just gotta have
was,
it.
it was
Yeah,
added, so
okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Dawes.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Haley and Carla, and all of you budget people for getting through this for us. If we have no other questions, we have no other items on the agenda, so we will adjourn at 12:57. Thank you.